You're very welcome back to The Chirp. This is a podcast where we discuss the topics of money and loans, swapping hands with friends and families, and how these relationships can be affected by such situations for better or for worse. Now, if you have been here before, you're very welcome back. If this is your first time here, feel free to binge on all of our episodes as we are 4 stories in and we are going strong. Had a great chat with a colleague of mine called JoAnn Shilling, who is today's interview, and we work together at a podcast interview marketing company called Interview Valet. But up until then, she worked for her family business for 15 years, where she essentially ran the show, which is something I found very interesting, something I've no experience with. Now, obviously, Joanne is living the remote working life, as so many people are these days, but it was great to catch up and hear about some of the customer stories that she had with her family business and how it affected, family and business itself and the community as a whole as well. So, without further ado, let's dive straight into the interview with Joanne. Please leave us a comment or a review on the episode and let us know your thoughts. Let's go. Okay, well, listen, Joanne, thank you so much for joining me today. You are officially our 4th guest on The Chirp, and you're bringing your 4th story as well. So thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks, Cameron. Thanks for having me. It was a real honor for you to ask me and to be on the show.
The honor is all mine. Joanne, where are you joining us from at the moment?
Currently, I am in cloudy Fort Myers,
Hmm.
Florida, but typically the weather is beautiful. It's one of the reasons I just recently relocated here.
Yeah, well, as I was just saying to you, I recently relocated to Barcelona and I'm wearing my Irish woolly jumper, which is that's just a little bit depressing. But what's the weather usually like in Florida? How come it's bad at the moment? I can't imagine is it winter at the moment there?
Yes, we're going into the winter season, but it's about usually 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Sorry, I'm not familiar with what that would be Celsius, but just like the perfect temperature. It's just basically gorgeous. You can wear tank top and shorts and be really comfortable outside.
That's the dream.
Hmm.
That's the dream. So a little bit about your history, Joanne, because obviously I used to work with you in a podcast booking agency, but also I did a bit of a deep dive on your LinkedIn. And before Interview Valet, where you currently work, you spent a huge amount of time working. What's the name of the business? Is it Joe Shilling?
Correct. It's Joe Shilling Auto right now. Before it was Joe Shilling Inc. And it was actually
Okay.
my father's auto repair shop. So it's a small family run business that he has been the owner of he had been previously about 45 years or so. So I grew up with,
Wow.
um, yeah, having this shop basically as another part of our family. I think anybody that owns a business understands that it's basically like having a baby. So
Mm.
I had a little bit of resentment maybe towards this sibling growing up, that was taking all of my father's time. But then as I got older, I realized that it is a great opportunity to work there, to be able to spend time with him, and then also it allowed me a lot of freedom. I was a single mom at the time with a young son, so I was able to really just be involved with his education and field trips and doctor's appointments and things like that that I needed to do. I could just basically say, I got to take off, and it was okay. There were kind of hidden benefits to it.
Yeah. So your dad was always very understanding and kind of allowed you to work around the life that you already had. So the dream boss, it sounds like. So when did you kind of start working there? When did it all begin? What's your earliest memory? And were you kind of inducted in as a teenager and then you took it from there?
No, it's so funny. I never worked there for the summer or anything like that. It was just like I said, just sort of this other, sibling, this extension of our family, because my mom worked there as well. So it was always there. And then I guess I had it in my head, I'm never going to work in the shop. It was something,
Mm,
like I said, against it. But then, as like I said, my life changed, situations changed. I was divorced, and realized that my son was going to need me, and I
mhm,
needed to make a living. And it just was sort of a timing thing. They had somebody that was there in the receptionist position, and she was ready to move on. So I just kind of filled in there. And then it just grew. And I eventually basically just kind of took over running it for my dad. So I would do bookkeeping and anything with HR, onboarding, and dealing with employee grievances, benefits, marketing, the invoicing, customer service. I mean, I just wore a lot of different hats in that role, and I learned a ton. And then just would kind of take things to my dad for a final approval. I've vetted
mhm.
this, new internet company that's going to save the company $100 a month, just sign off on it. And so eventually it got to where he was just like, I put a piece of paper in front of him and he would sign it.
Yeah. Well, there's the trust. Wonderful. And did you enjoy it all the way through? Was it kind of an experience that you always remember fondly?
Of course. Yeah. Especially
Mm,
spending that time being able to be with my dad, because as I mentioned, the shop took so much of his time and energy growing up. It was amazing to be able to be a part of that part of his life and see how respected he was in the community and with
mhm.
customers. That was amazing, because it's a small community where I live, where I was living in Delaware. It's a small state. And,
Yeah.
just being in that industry, the auto repair, he was a transmission rebuilding expert. And he was kind of one of the last people to be doing that. And so to have people call and just really value his experience and opinions, definitely that's what I treasure about that experience, as well as, like I said, those all those business minded, examples that I learned.
Absolutely. I'm sure you learned a ton. And what kind of prompted you to walk away? Why did you pack it in and move on to other opportunities?
My father was ready to retire finally. I think he's in his 70s, so it was his baby, he was holding
Yeah.
on. And then once my mother basically convinced him that it was time, he had put it up for sale, and a group of wonderful guys bought it, and I helped them transition their new team, their new leadership team in there. And basically, I was ready to move on to my next chapter in my life as
Hmm.
well.
Fantastic. And is it safe to say that they just aren't doing as good a job as you had been doing for the last few years? Are you watching from the sidelines going,
I
mm?
have to tell you something. So it's hilarious because my father and the replacement office manager that took over after me, who I had trained, he actually kind of stayed on, I guess, about 6 months after I quit. And
Hmm.
so she and he worked together, and they got along great, which is great. And but
Yeah.
almost a little too good. And he was really advocating for her with the new management to give her a raise. Like, she was doing so much. And, he was just really trying to impress upon the new owners how valuable she was to them. And at one point, he shared with me that he told them she's doing a better job than Joanne. And I was
Oh
like,
no.
ooh.
Ouch.
I said,
That's a bird.
you didn't really mean that, right?
No, no, no. He couldn't have. We shouldn't have said it to your face anyway.
They shouldn't have
Um,
told me that. Come on.
no, no, I don't think so. I think that's weird. And during kind of well, how long were you there? Is it 13 years, 14 years?
I think close to 15. Yeah. Hmm.
15. Wow, that's a big chunk of your life. And during those times, obviously the premise of the show was to chat about, tales that where, money and loans have kind of affected your relationships during your 15-year tenure at the company. Did any of these kind of tales cross paths with you? Did you ever have any experiences like that?
I did, definitely. And, it's funny. Before we spoke, I was thinking about what stories I would feel comfortable sharing. And as you're just saying that, a story popped into my head. This isn't the one that I was thinking about, but I think that um, there were definitely many experiences because in my role, I was doing that. Um, Build collection, basically we always had it as a company policy that the vehicle would be paid for at the time of service because basically when somebody were to take their vehicle and not pay for the services, we wouldn't have any kind of collateral to follow up for collection of that, so they would have pretty high bills at times because this transmission work, I don't know if you're familiar, but it can be expensive. And
Yeah.
either way, whether you're doing the rebuilding of the transmission, which could be a little bit more economical for the owner of the vehicle, or the just taking out and replacing it, um, either one is pretty expensive. So we would have higher tickets, probably around between could be between $1,500 and $4,500. We would do other things as well, brakes and air conditioning and electrical and all those things. But really, it was the transmission repair that was driving the revenue of the business.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, so like I said, it was our policy was to have the owner pay at the time of service, because we wouldn't want to be stuck, on the hook for, 15, 25, $3,500 when they're out driving their
Hmm.
car around. And people would ask me, well, can I come in and give you $200 and take my car and, want to make payments on it, basically. And, the answer was no. And I would try to
No
explain that,
chance.
yeah, I try to explain that, well, if you have your vehicle out there, then we don't have any way of recovering, what you would owe us. Um,
Mm.
so so that's kind of a typical situation of what would happen. But there was one experience that like I said, came to mind. We had a friend of the business. He was a very loyal customer and actually a veteran in the military. So, we had a healthy amount of respect for him and his sacrifices that he had made and sacrifices his family had made. And he needed a new transmission, and we did that for him, and I'm sure my father gave him a little discount on the price as well. We did have a military discount, so I'm sure he got that.
Lovely.
um,
Hmm.
and and I knew that he had kind of issues with his credit and stuff, and but we were willing to kind of work with him, and we did allow him to take the vehicle after we did the repairs with I don't remember exactly what it was, but let's say $1,500 balance, and he had promised
Hmm.
that he would make payments. And as you can imagine where the story is going, he didn't make the payments, and it really soured me, in that experience, because like I said, had such a healthy respect for what he had been doing as a veteran. I just really wanted to give him like the benefit of the doubt. And,
Of
um,
course, yeah.
I ended up, I mean, of course, I would try to call him regularly and contact him and stuff and just remind him. And, at some point I believe he wasn't deployed again, but he took a contracting job and was overseas. And, that was all sort of confidential. He couldn't tell me where he was. And, so it just really bred sort of mistrust, because it was like, is he really
Hmm.
telling the truth, or is he just living up the street and, lying to me. So then I actually sent his mom a letter and was like, this is really unfortunate that he took advantage of us in this way. I mean, we're a small family run business. We don't have the ability to carry, a $1,500 job. So um, that would be my answer to that question.
And kind of your customer base in general, I'm kind of keen to ask a bit about, this whole collateral thing that you mentioned, and that, the cars are the collateral. Once you say goodbye to the car, it's so hard to, track people down. Did you have a kind of a credit card detail system eventually put in place? Or obviously you don't want to give the car away before payment has gone through, but like other places, if you have the credit, like for example a hotel room, if you wreck the hotel room. I don't do that. But if someone did, your credit card is on file, you will have to pay for it in some capacity. I'm just wondering, was that kind of ever an option for you guys?
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of talking about maybe a bit of like a deposit situation. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, they would definitely, people would come in and, we would give them an estimate for, again, $2,000. And they'd say, well, I don't have that much right now, but I have 200. So they would do that and come in the next week with their, next week's pay and put 100 down, or,
yeah,
something like that. When they eventually were able to bring the vehicle in, the job was basically paid for, and so there were situations like that. And I was actually thinking about one of the stories that I did want to share was about a personal situation that I just experienced before moving down to Florida. I had an older vehicle that I would use to run around town. It was small Honda, so it was good on gas.
hmm,
And
always good.
yeah, but there was no way I could bring that down to Florida with me with my other vehicle. So I can't drive two cars at once.
No.
It isn't really going to make sense to like ship it or anything. So I thought,
Mm,
well, I'll sell it. And that's what happened. A gentleman came to me and it was out on the street with a for sale sign on it. And he approached me and said, I don't have all the money right now, but could I give you, $400? And I said, sure. And I wrote up, just I guess as I would at the shop. And maybe that experience for me just really like lent itself to that transaction. So
yeah,
I wrote, the VIN number and a total and how much he was giving me. And he was sort of impressed, he's like, well, you've done this before.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and, uh, and it worked out well. I mean, he came back the next day and brought me a couple $100. And then when he got paid the next week, he brought me the remainder. I gave him the title and, it was his car. So that was a situation where it worked out well for both of
positively.
us. Yeah. But I mean,
Mm,
there's just so many ways in transactions like that where it can go sideways. And I was asking a friend last night, about, I told him I was going to be on the show. I said, is there anything
mm,
that comes to your mind about a situation where you loan somebody money? And he was telling me where a gentleman approached him, a longtime, friend, family friend, who was in a bind, and he said, I need some money. Do you got 10,000 you can lend me? And the guy said, no. And he said, how about 5,000? He said, well, all right, but what do you have for collateral? So I think that's a really important lesson maybe for listeners to take away, is just to keep that in mind of having something that you could use as a value to replace that money if
yeah,
something were to happen with that transaction. But yeah, in his situation, the guy never paid. Oh, so the guy says, well, I'll give you the title to my van. My van is paid off and it's worth more than 5,000. So he says, okay, does that, takes the title, gives the guy a chance, goes over to try to collect for, I don't know, months. And the guy's not paying.
yeah,
So he takes the title to whatever, the DMV, the tax assessor, and they say, oh no, the original owner of this vehicle came in and got a new title. So this title is not good anymore.
oh no.
And I had
So
never
we
heard of that.
double screwed him over.
I had never heard of that before, and I was like, "Wow, that's some low down stuff."
That's awful.
Yeah.
That's a triple story sandwich where you've had a nice story in the middle, and then just two kind of bad ones on either side.
Yeah, right, right.
But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, but it is interesting, the whole aspect of, I'll give you, whether you're friend or foe or family, I will give you the loan, but you need to show me something, in return, in the form of collateral as well. It's interesting. I'd never kind of heard of that before, but I suppose in this case it wasn't enough. So I suppose yourself personally, Joanne, moving forward, you're working now in Interview Valet. What does kind of the professional future hold for you? What are you looking to do? Obviously, Interview Valet are a podcast interview marketing agency. Um, I know from working with you, you're very, very, very good at your job. But what are you kind of looking to the future in terms of your professional career?
Oh, well, you're so generous. Thank you, Cameron.
You're welcome.
I've really enjoyed this opportunity with Interview Valet. It's been so amazing. As I said, I left the shop where I was for 15 years and was, I'm not going to say floundering because it was a planned exit. But I
Mm,
was kind of wondering, what am I going to do? And I was able to take a trip with my son, which was so fun. We went on a
mm.
ski trip, and unfortunately, I got hurt, as what happens a lot of the time when you're skiing.
I know a
And
lot of friends of mine that have injured themselves skiing. Yes, it's quite dangerous.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
high risk sport. So
Hmm.
I was literally laid up in bed and doing kind of a job search to, I was like, well, I'm got some free time, let me see what I can do here, and
Mm,
applied to Interview Valet, and things worked out. So it was a great um I guess time filler at that time in my life, but it has provided me with so many skills that I didn't expect, especially in this remote work environment, post pandemic, where so many companies are taking that route. So I have these new software project collaboration experience, Zoom, creating Loom videos, scheduling, all those things that I've been able to add to my skill set and my resume.
mm.
So I love Interview Valet. I love creating relationships and connections. So hopefully just continuing with that.
Yeah. And was there any kind of weirdness or barriers going from working in one place in your family business for 15 years to working for a remote company, doing something completely different? I know obviously you're still, customer facing, or it's customer centric or a client centric role, but were there any kind of hurdles you had to get over, or was it kind of like a seamless, migrating to this wonderful remote working world that we now live in?
Well, that's a great question because they are such different experiences. And I think for me, maybe just because they were so different, I wasn't really focused on like, well, I don't know if that's making any sense, but like because they were so different, there wasn't even able to make like a comparison. Um,
Yeah.
because being in a physical location where people are walking in and I'm greeting them, and all of that is so different than sending out emails and contacting people through chats and stuff. Um, but the way that Interview Valet is run, and with our founder, it feels very much like a family business, and I do feel
Yeah,
very
I agree.
invested. Yeah, I feel very invested in it
Mm.
in that way. So um I don't know, I've definitely brought I guess that experience from the 15 years that I was at the shop. I brought that, I guess, passion and, just being focused.
Organization, I would say.
Yeah, I'm just being focused
Mm.
on maybe culture is the word I'm looking for, company culture.
Yeah, culture's a good one because I think wherever I've worked, culture's always been so important to me. It's what I always kind of, yeah, put forward in interviews as well, just kind of assessing the culture. Do you think that you'll ever work in a bricks and mortar establishment ever again?
I'm definitely open to it,
Yeah.
that is kind of just one of the things with my job right now. I do get to ping people and send them little chats, but I have this sort of little fantasy running in my head where it's like, well, if I could just go get coffee with this person, or if we could just go meet over by the water cooler, it'd
Yeah.
be so cool.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely open to it. Not to get political or anything, but I've had all my shots, and I don't mind wearing face masks. And so if there was ever a situation, where I needed to be in an office, I do miss that social interaction and that face-to-face piece of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And I suppose lastly, my last question to you would be if there are listeners out there who do work in a family business or, are might be taking over or running the show like you are, what would be your pearls of wisdom that you might give?
Well, my pearls of wisdom, would say come from, um, having that shop, as I keep mentioning it, as another family member,
Yeah,
and
makes
having
sense.
having my dad and both my mom and my dad working there, sometimes seeing how they would bring the conflicts that happened at the shop back at home or vice versa, and so I would just recommend trying to keep those boundaries pretty firm, because
Hmm.
it's not going to do anybody any good in terms of employees and company culture, to
Hmm.
bring the drama of personal life and marriage into the company set, and then vice versa. It's bringing that home into your family life isn't gonna be healthy in that way. So I think I learned from that, seeing that happen sometimes with them, growing up. And then when I was working with my dad, trying to keep things a little bit separate. I mean, we would bring things up, over family dinners and stuff like, oh, remember when that happened today? Or what'd you think about
Yeah, I'd
that?
say it's so hard not to.
Yeah, yeah, but just trying
Yeah.
to keep it in more of like a reflective tone, and not like um get into the situation again, go over it again, just kind of thinking about like, well, yeah, that happened. Okay, so can you pass the mashed potatoes?
Yeah. That's fantastic. Listen, Joanne, thank you so much for giving me the insight into what it's like as a family business. It's something I've zero experience of. So it was always nice to get a little bit of insight. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Cameron. Like I said, it was a real treat, and I wish you luck in this venture. I've enjoyed listening to the last couple episodes and what you bring to it.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I've never really grasped the idea of a family business, and I've always been very wary of the dynamic that it might create. And Joanne spoke about not bringing your work home with you. Sometimes it can't be avoided, but she did mention how it's always best to talk about things other than the family business when you're eating your mashed potatoes. But it was great to see how invested she was in her dad's company, referring it to it as another sibling. And it was clear to see that she'd learned so much as well. And it was also nice to see how much time she was able to spend with her family during the day also. Now, when the veteran didn't pay his bill for the car, it was very interesting to see why Joanne was annoyed, because not only was, the company not getting paid for their service, but her family wasn't getting paid for the service as well. You have to remember that it's Joanne's family name on the front of the building. So if you're not paying the business, you're not paying the family. And Joanne said that it was, a small enough company in a small city. And if I were in Joanne's shoes, I would find it very hard not to take this customer's actions personally. Her friend's story about Collateral was one that I found very interesting as well. I actually had a bit of a mental switch about loans when I heard the story, because what better way to take the taboo out of loans? If someone wanted to borrow $10,000 off me and I didn't necessarily trust them, I'd feel a lot better about the whole situation if I had a little bit of collateral to hold on to. Now, the whole thing about the lender changing the title on the vehicle, well, that's a different story, but it did get me thinking that if a bit of collateral is put up and both parties show a little bit of generosity and a little bit of trust, everyone can come out unscathed. That's it from the Chirp on this fine fortnight. Thank you so much for listening. Leave us a comment and leave us a review and get in touch if you have any stories of your own. Our next episode will be out in another 2 weeks around Thanksgiving. So until then, everybody take care. Bye-bye.